Okay, so we have our cuff that is sewn, and again it's going to tend to look just a little bit bubbled because this fabric is really going to turn and roll, and it will lay smooth when it's rolled. It will not lay smooth when it's folded out. So don't be concerned if it looks a little bit like it's bubbled. You want it to lay smooth when we get the cuff actually rolled into place here. So now we need to trim and grade, and the cuff itself needs to be 3/8 of an inch. So if you basted your interfacing at 1/4 of an inch, you should be able to just literally come back and trim right on that basting line. And by doing that, it actually trims my cuff to 3/8 of an inch. So that is why we have you baste interfacing on at 1/4 of an inch rather than a lot of guide sheets will tell you to baste it at 1/2 an inch. It works, you can do that, but then you have to go back and unpick all your basting in order to trim and grade. So this just saves you a step to trim the cuff itself to 3/8 of an inch. Then you will come back and you will trim the cuff facing. So turn it over and you will trim the cuff facing to 1/4 of an inch. And so as you look at that, you can see I've got 1/8 of an inch of cuff, that the printed fabric sticking out beyond my cuff facing there because I'm trimming that cuff facing to 1/4 of an inch. And when I trim different lengths or different pieces of fabric to different lengths, then it's called grading. And then you are going to trim the interfacing down to 1/8 of an inch, or as close as you can get it down to the stitching where it's applied, because we want to basically reduce the bulk of that piece of interfacing. And so I'm just going to take my scissors and lay them a little bit on the side there and trim my interfacing piece very, very close to the stitching so that I basically that little bit of 1/8 of an inch or less. So my interfacing will be down to 1/8 of an inch, my cuff will be 3/8 of an inch, and my cuff facing is 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to trim all the way around the style edge. I'm going to leave the top edge untrimmed. Okay, so after the style edge of the cuff has been trimmed and graded, the interfacing has been graded to the 1/8 of an inch, the cuff itself to 3/8, and the cuff facing to 1/4. These round curves need to be pinked so that it can be notched. And so you're just going to take a pair of pinking shears and pink that curved edge. And I like to pink each layer separately so that the notches will most likely be slightly offset from each other. That just like when you notched your Princess seam sample and you offset those clips and notches, if you notch all the way through all your layers of fabric, you will get weaker areas on your seam where the little triangles go in toward your seam. It actually weakens that spot of the seam through all your layers, and you're more likely to get a stop sign or little flat edges or poked edges on the curve. So if you'll take the time and trim those separately, you will actually have a little bit better and smoother curve when the time comes. And so I just take and trim those separately. So now that you've trimmed and graded that,